Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the country and around the world. This is Tim May coming to you live on Lettermen Row today. Bottom line is I had to make a trip to Lufkin to deal with some family matters. Holding down the fort at Lettermen Row World Headquarters in Columbus is my good friend, Boston. You call him Austin Ward. And Boston, we've got a little bit to talk about here, man, in this, what do you want to call it? I don't even want to call it the postseason. We can call it the postseason Tim May podcast, but really it's the post Are You Kidding Me bowl game podcast where I'm still shaking my head on what went down in Glendale for all kinds of reasons. I don't know if you've recovered from it yet or not, from what kind of unfolded in front of you, but where do you stand from an emotional standpoint?
I don't know if I've recovered from what I saw. I think that it was one of the more interesting games I think that I've ever covered. That's to put it mildly, because I think that we're going to be talking about it, Tim, probably forever. This will go
Yep.
down as one of the most stinging, bitter losses I think in Ohio State history. I know that that's a mouthful, but this will just be one of those games where the ejection, the fumble, the last play, the comeback interception, those three things, and maybe six or seven others will be talked about forever. And it's not even been a week since that game was over, so I'm still trying to process everything that I saw. I know that you are too, but I can't imagine what it's like for those guys that were a part of it, for Ryan Day, for that coaching staff, for those seniors, the players. I mean, they had a chance to make history, and in a couple instances it slipped through their fingers, and in a couple instances it was ripped away from them in a way that they will probably never be able to forgive or forget.
Country trying to tell Ohio State fans and even media, to put it behind you. Nothing's going to change anything. If you'd scored touchdowns instead of kicking field goals in the first half, you'd be okay at this moment. I agree. I do agree with that rationale.
Mm-hmm.
But when you take a touchdown off the board that didn't deserve to be taken off the board, a touchdown that had given Ohio State the lead in the third quarter, and of course I'm not talking about the targeting thing because that could have been called either way.
Right.
We discussed that after the game, you, me, and Bermanology. But bottom line is when you take a touchdown off the board, off what was a ridiculously great play made first by Jeff Okudah to strip the ball from Justin Ross, and then Jordan Fuller to scoop and score, that has long-lasting ramifications, actually lifelong lasting ramifications
Yep.
for those involved. And, I need to come back and explain it with I'm talking about the officials, to explain it with a cover your rear end explanation. It just blew my mind. And the more I've seen that replay, the more it looks more and more like a catch. And you know where I'm going there.
Yeah.
And I'm talking, where I'm going there. The bottom line was there was no call made on the field. The officials on the field who were right in front of it, right on top of it, let the play run out without a flag or a whistle. And, without a whistle, main thing. And the replay official, it took it upon himself to declare that, in fact, it was not a catch. And I really haven't run into anybody except a couple of people who explained it immediately during the game. You remember how Kirk Herbstreit was incredulous that was ruled incomplete. And then they give this explanation that he was in the process of putting it away, but hadn't put it away. I don't even know what the hell that means. That means every pass you catch, you have to pluck from the air and then tuck into your arm before it's a catch. Well, we all know that's baloney.
Oh yeah.
You can catch a ball and never do anything with it except hold it up in the air. Remember KJ Hill with that one-handed catch that then he couldn't remove the ball from his glue hands. That was the original glue man. But
Well,
I
here's the thing,
digress.
like Tim, to your point there, if it had been in the end zone, that would have been ruled a touchdown for
Mm-hmm.
Clemson. I mean, that's it.
Yes.
That would have been a catch. He had control and 2, 3, 4 feet down. Like,
Yeah.
there's just no explanation for it. I think that's the easiest way to look at it. If the guy had been in the end zone, there's no way that they're ruling that incomplete. No way.
Yeah, but this is what's interesting is Austin, I'm trying to figure out. I just called you Austin instead of Boston. I just usurped authority. Boston. The interesting thing to look at though is what are the ramifications of this? Because officials, when you have the head of Big Ten officials come out and say it was a catch, when you have the head of basically the national head of officials say it was a catch and a strip, where does it go from here? Meaning, what will be the new guideline? Will there be a new guideline come down? Probably, but these things still come down to subjective judgments by the replay officials involved in or the officials on the field, no matter how much we pontificate about it. I'm just bothered that it was taken off the board by someone just trying to assert his authority on the game. That's what bothered me. And more than anything else, because officials are going to make, questionable calls on occasion, but on the biggest stage like that, and that crew, I guess, was coming off a game where they had a few questionable calls, et cetera. The Iron Bowl game, Alabama and Auburn, where they had a few questionable calls during the course of that game also. But I just don't know where it goes from a clearing the air standpoint of what are the guidelines that officials get off of this that will help them down the road.
Well, and how is the College Football Playoff Committee and the organizers going to react about how they assign officials and the way they look at it? Because there's really never been serious accountability for officiating ever, and I know that it's a thankless job and that it's hard and there's going to be mistakes. I completely understand all that. The human element is always going to be part of it in football because there are so many subjective things that happen on every single play. But when you get a high-profile situation this wrong, I think Mike Bobo, the former Colorado State coach, put out a comment that I thought was interesting the other day, where they needed to be all the officiating crews needed to be evaluated and ranked, and then you assign them based on who had the best year, which is the way that the NFL does it with all of their crews. And look, I know that that's hard. It's another layer of bureaucracy and everything to sort through, but this is the most important games in the country. Everyone was watching, and everyone saw them mess it up, and their careers aren't gonna be ended over that. They're gonna have a chance to go call other games and big SEC games next year, but Jeff Okudah doesn't get another shot. Jordan Fuller doesn't get another shot. Chase Young doesn't get another shot. These guys, that was it, and they have to pay the price for what these guys did wrong. So something has to be done about it, and I don't.
Well, like you said, these guys are never going to be satisfied. I'm talking about the fellas you just that you just named, who put in up to that moment a grand season for Ohio State. And this is what really chaps my rear end though is when discussion of this comes up, some, like I said, of the sanctimonious out there go, well, Ohio State should have taken care of business, when they had a shot, no. I mean, we're talking about a touchdown being taken off the board that never should have been taken off the board. Ohio State did take care of business,
right?
And so there's no way to explain it that way. That no matter how incompetent or bad the officiating is, you should still figure out a way to rise above it. Well, that's not real life. I mean, that's not what happens, and that's just a cop-out explanation for it. And and you're right. I mean, these guys had a shot at something unbelievable this season. They had a shot at turning in the first 15-0 season in Ohio State history, and going for a national championship, and it was basically ripped away from them. And I wanted to understood. I mean, my main complaint is with the replay official, the guys on the field. It happens in a heartbeat for those guys.
And they got it right.
And they're going to miss stuff, just like on the Shaun Wade hit against Trevor Lawrence. I mean, there are all kinds of ways to explain it. Number one, Shaun Wade did sort of dip his head. Number two, Trevor Lawrence definitely ducked as for Chase Young was bearing down on him from the right side, and so a replay of that showed all that. I'm not sure it rose, as we talked about after the game, it rose to the point of being ejected from the game from a classic targeting standpoint. I'm not sure I'm pretty sure Shaun Wade didn't launch into him.
Nope.
He definitely hit him he definitely hit him helmet to helmet, a glancing blow, just because of happenstance of the play. But then on the other side, right there in front of the officials on the field, Chase Young's face mask has been grabbed by the right tackle and is being, manipulated, and replay, I guess, couldn't fix that,
Right.
So it's like, if anything, it was offsetting penalties in that on that play, and that weren't called.
Right.
So, you're going to miss the face mask stuff. They also missed the helmet to helmet, but replay called down and fixed that, and then replay, jumped in and fixed something that didn't need to be fixed. The strip, scoop, and score, and that's what drives you crazy, because there's nothing a player or a coach on the field. Just think if Ryan Day had challenged that call. Well, who looks at it then, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the crazy part. Just to the guys on the field actually got that call right. I think that's important to remember. And,
yes.
And then somebody somewhere, like I really, going into the game, I know some people are always tracking it. Well, who's this conference crew? They know the officials by name. I've never paid that much of attention to it, and I wouldn't have thought, well, what happens if there's a review? Like, is this going to be, this is called into Birmingham and the SEC office is involved? Like, that part is crazy to me.
Yeah.
And I never give it a second thought, and then until they mess it up, and then you have to, look into all the, Gene Smith wants to know the process, and what, all they can get is an apology. He's upset about it, and they had a right to be upset. And it's just it's just a bizarre way that it's set up, and I know another factor is it's college football. There's 130 teams and 5 power leagues, and everything is more complicated because of that. But there's just I don't see how it can be this complicated.
Here's the problem with replay review, which I had a feeling we would get to eventually. Mm-hmm. If you watch the NFL games now, you can think you do. You have no idea what pass interference is anymore.
Right.
I mean, you have no idea, because of just the subjective way even the replay review is being done. A lot of it, you feel like they're doing it to cover the rear ends of the guys on the field when they don't reverse calls and things like that. And the way they've gotten into, like, even the announcers have gotten in on the gig. That's on the gambit. That's why I praise Kirk Herbstreit for standing up and saying he was incredulous that scoop and score wasn't allowed. Strip, scoop, and score wasn't allowed to stand. Mm-hmm. I praise him because his replay official guy that I think immediately made a comment on it, kind of agreed with the replay official. And but the thing about pass interference now, I grew up understanding that pass interference is if you keep in some way, form, or fashion from a receiver or a defender from making an honest attempt at the catch before you grab any part of his arm or et cetera and impede that motion. And now we see guys grabbing other guys' arms in the NFL, mm-hmm. and before the ball gets there, I'm talking about before the ball gets there, and they're going, well, that's just football. Well, no, it's not football. It's pass interference. And they just keep so replay really has taken us even deeper into a hole instead of fixing these things, because now it gets into what are the intentions of the replay official. What are his backgrounds? Everybody, a lot of the national media was going, well, they got away with that, got a big one called on their favor in the 2002 national championship game. By the way, that's the way the national media talks when they are being sanctimonious. Yep. Well, they got a good one called. And I'm going, I've explained to people a million times the Terry Porter call, corner of the end zone, Chris Campbell, bottom line was that was in at least defensive holding. And for sure, it was pass interference, in my opinion. Yeah. The official who was standing right in front of the play just kept his whistle. It didn't blow his whistle and kept his flag in his pocket. But the official in the corner of the end zone, Terry Porter, saw it and made the call. He had the guts to make the call. And history wasn't altered. History went down the way it should have gone down, if you follow my drift. Yeah. And that's totally different from what we saw. History was altered in this case. This was sort of like getting a time machine and going back and, in some big battle or something, taking care of business before the general gets to make the big call. I mean, this is exactly what we saw. Past that, let's just, before we move on to, obviously the developments here on the Ohio State coaching staff, et cetera, and the Ohio State player staff.
Yeah.
What's your takeaway from that game more than anything else if you divorce yourself from the calls that altered it?
I guess my top takeaway would be when we talk about Ohio State having the chance to make history, that's one of the most talented teams I've ever seen. It had some of the best chemistry that I've ever covered, and I made these comparisons to 14 and 15 a lot. Ohio State had all those missed opportunities, all the 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 plays that went against them, and they only needed one or two of them to actually beat Clemson, defending national champions, 28-game winning streak. I really thought that Ohio State was clearly the better team and dominated most of that game. And so all last week we went into it when we were out there in Arizona, and I said the winner of that game is going to win the national title.
Yeah.
I don't believe that anymore because I thought Ohio State was on a completely different level than Clemson. And
I agree.
And maybe I'm grading Clemson too harshly because the fact they were able to play a close game and then get a win against that Ohio State team should carry weight. But Dabo Swinney said this the other day that they were all hurting. I mean, they were in shock at how fast, physical, aggressive, and talented Ohio State was. And when they were down 16-0, they were reeling and they'd been punched in the mouth. And they had a lot of guys. Now they should count themselves lucky. Now they complained about both teams did the shorter preparation for the Fiesta Bowl. Clemson should count its lucky stars that it has 2 weeks to try and get ready for LSU in that test because they were physically beaten up in that game. So again, that's why I say that this is such a devastating loss for Ohio State because they were a special team and they had every right to be going to play for the national title, and it didn't happen for them. I'm not gonna sit here and forever make excuses for them or whatever, but I think this is one of the biggest missed opportunities that the Buckeyes could have had, and that's why it's going to sting so bad for years to come.
Yeah, well, I think you can, with a straight face, say Ohio State was robbed, and yet Ohio State had enough riches to buy itself out of it.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
And blowing it. The three settling for 3 field goals. At least they put points on the board at those in those moments.
Right.
But yeah, just one touchdown in any of those instances would have made a huge difference in a game. And of course, at the end, I thought we were witnessing, and it still may end up being that way, but we were witnessing the first act in the Justin Fields 2020 Heisman Trophy campaign as he took the team right down the field. And then, of course, they had the call. They made a call where the Clemson defense arrayed exactly as they wanted them to on that what turned out to be the last offensive play. And Chris Olave looked back, thought he saw Justin Fields about to scramble, broke off his route, and Justin Fields, I don't know if you agree with me or not, I thought he threw the best pass he threw all day. I mean, just from a stepping into it and letting it go, pass, post cut over the middle that the defender, Nolan Turner, was able to, third string safety who was on the field, was able to run down because Chris Olave had broken off his route and fallen on that ridiculously slick, weird turf. And that was that because, the idea was Olave man-to-man, just go up and beat the guy, for the ball. And we've seen him do it many times.
Over and over.
So, anyway, that is what it is. We saw the greatest rushing season in Ohio State history by J.K. Dobbins. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Beats Eddie George's record. Eddie was on my flight on the way back to, I was connected in Nashville coming back because I had to get back early, and he was actually on my flight. So don't make fun of me for taking that wasn't a red eye, it was a bleary eye. The next morning, and he just gave it up to J.K. Dobbins. I mean, what a performance and what a season. And the thing about J.K. Dobbins' season was he only played half of about 3/4 of the games.
Right.
And in the biggest games, as you've pointed out and others have pointed out, his yardage in the biggest games, by biggest I mean toughest, was off the charts, and that has to do with him and the offensive line, which I think also played pretty well the other night against a marauding, scheme laden. I like to say scheme laden defense with Brent Venables calling the plays. They went right down the track, clickety clack, on that last drive. I think you agree with me,
Yep.
and had a real shot at winning the game. And it's just unfortunate when it comes into the old grown up bromides. You can't win them all, and this team gave everybody just ridiculous memories this year of winning by double figures every time out until the last time, and then had a shot at winning by double figures against Clemson, but couldn't, for want of another term, based on the those 3 first half drives that ended in field goals, and then the last drive, which ended in interception, they couldn't finish it off.
Well, I think that you slipped something in there that is interesting. It shouldn't be overlooked how special the rest of that year was, and the memories that those will last. They're probably now gonna be overshadowed by what happened in the Fiesta Bowl, but you with J.K. Dobbins and everything you talked about there, Chase Young with the single season sack record, Jeff Okudah, unanimous All-American, probably going to be a top 5 pick. The first team in college football history to have 2 Heisman finalists, one from the offense, one from the defense with Fields and Young. Yeah. Another blowout win in the game. 3 straight Big Ten titles now. I could keep going. It's Jonah Jackson, the kind of fairy tale season for him, getting to go from Rutgers to being a Big Ten performer for the undefeated Big Ten champions. It's just there are all these stories everywhere, and I think it'll be, or it should be, important for us to keep talking about the good and the positives from that, and remind everyone that it's not like this season was a disaster or a failure for Ohio State because they didn't win the national title. Those are hard to win, and should they or could they have done it? Yeah, they definitely could have. But man, if you don't enjoy the other 13 games that they played and Ryan Day's first full season in charge and all that, if you're going to base it just on that one game, you're really missing out on the rest of it. And I know the loss hurts for Ohio State, and it will. It's not, it's not probably going to go away talking about the fumble, as I said right off the top of the show. But the rest of the stuff, it was special. It was fun to cover, and I think, just speaking for myself, it'll be important not to dwell just on the Fiesta Bowl as we start, covering the 2020 team and all the positives for what they have coming back.
I'll tell you what, I don't mean to end this on a down note, but what we're really sort of a bummer for the Ohio State defense, though, all year, man, for the most part, they kept that big play, the big play, which had haunted them the entire 2018 season. They kept that from hurting them in 2019, with the new input of Greg Madison, defense coordinator, and Jeff Hafley, defensive co-coordinator, Al Washington, Matt Barnes, the new staff joining Larry Johnson. But, man, Trevor Lawrence, what was that, 65, 70-yard run to get them back in the game and I'm talking about Clemson, feel good about itself, that quarterback right up the gut pretty much. And then on that last possession, a 94-yard drive in 4 plays, that's going to sting for a while, man, because suddenly the big play came back and bit them in the butt. And so, we'll see how they, quote unquote, live with that. Right. But clearly things are changing, and that's what our segue is. I don't mean to make that a gloomy doomy segue, but it's right there. It's real. Yep. Well, what the bottom line is, Clemson made the plays and Ohio State didn't, except for an asterisk. Past that, Jeff Hafley leaves, as you've been reporting for a while now, and LettermenRow.com. That's where you really get the scoops anymore. If people aren't paying attention, they're not understanding it. But they really want Kerry Combs to fill that spot, to make that big triumphant return. I wouldn't call him a prodigal son. He was a Papa Cycles. Yeah,
they didn't want him to leave.
Yeah, but bottom line is, you think that's going to happen now? Do you think Kerry Combs will be making a grand return sometime to Ohio State football as the
Yep.
possibly co-coordinator and celebrated defensive backs coach.
Yeah, if I had to, as our guy Bermanology, when he makes his crystal ball predictions for recruiting, if I had to do that for this co-defensive coordinator secondary position, I would say that Kerry Combs will return to Ohio State. He's still involved in the NFL playoffs with the Tennessee Titans right now. I think the ball's been in Kerry Combs' court for a while now. He, I don't know specifically what he makes with the Titans, but NFL position coaches generally are not going to make as much as they could make with Power 5 programs and elite powerhouses like Ohio State. And he left and he went and got. I think he was kind of stuck in a little bit of a rut where he could have been that cornerbacks coach when he left a couple years ago. He could have done that forever, and he made decent money. But I think there's still part of him that believes he could go to a higher level, whether that was being a coordinator
Yes.
or potential. He wanted to be that. He thought he should be in the head coach mix for Cincinnati when Luke Fickell got that
Yes.
job, and he didn't. So I think part of him was the challenge to go to the NFL. Maybe brightens up the resume, spruces it up a little bit, and now lo and behold, Ryan Day has proven he did with Jeff Hafley that he wanted guys with NFL experience. He also knows Kerry Combs. There's a familiarity with that. Obviously, not just from Combs being at Ohio State, but Day working with him. I'm told that their wives get along extremely well. Don't
Yes.
underestimate that part of it. So I think all of this just kind of fits perfectly. Kerry gets to come back with a little more, 2 years of experience of just the X's and O's of that NFL game are always at just a slightly higher level than what you see in college football. That knowledge is big. That would certainly be appealing to Ohio State and then to recruits and then to Sean Wade or current Ohio State cornerbacks. We'll see what all plays out there. Cam Martinez, who is waiting till February to sign, as Burm has detailed over and over. But that's my my long-winded answer to yes. I think that Kerry Combs will be the answer there.
Yeah, dude, the part you didn't even add there, Kerry Combs is one of my favorite fellows I've ever covered. So from a media standpoint,
Absolutely, yeah, for sure.
From a selfish standpoint, I mean, who doesn't like talking to this guy? And the thing that bugged me about some people and their take on Kerry Combs when he was here before, without a doubt, he's a little bit of a nut. Maybe a lot of a nut, from the standpoint, that Minnesota game when he wore short sleeves, when it was 14 degrees out and the wind was blowing, it was snowing. And the way he runs up and down the field and the excitement he has, I was watching Matt Luke last night, watching the Georgia Baylor game, and Matt Luke, former head coach, at Ole Miss, is now the offensive line coach suddenly at Georgia. And I mean, kind of they remind me of each other. They're pure joy in the game. But then this guy was a hell of a high school head coach. I'm talking about Kerry Combs before he got into the college gigs. I mean, he's run things, as the old saying goes. And now he's got this, he's been dipped in the waters of the NFL now, from the experience of learning how these guys game plan, but also how you snooker people and how, technique wise, there are more than a couple of ways to skin a cat. And, and he'll have that on his resume, which, like you said, will be attractive to defensive back recruits who, everybody now can't wait to get somewhere else, it seems, and for those eager beavers, Kerry Combs can offer that on the resume, just like you're talking about. Let's get to the eager beavers. Let's go to another one. Obviously, the quarterbacks coach, Mike Yurcich, as you were reporting for a while, which I think surprised a lot of people when you first started talking about it. But, hey, lo and behold, it happened, right? He's headed to Texas, or he is in Texas. The idea is Corey Dennis, a lot of people know him best as being the son-in-law of Urban Meyer, but you and I both know Corey Dennis has paid his dues and then some in behind the scenes at Ohio State as a graduate assistant and et cetera, a quality control guy. But I mean, everybody who's worked with him from J.T. Barrett on up, I mean, they've praised their interactions with Corey Dennis. If in fact that comes to fruition, which there's a good chance it could, man. You remember, there was some thought that that Ryan Day might name him the quarterback's coach a year ago, and just kind of balked at it. Went for Mike Yurcich to bring in, get a little pollination from the Big 12. I won't go deeper into that like I did at one point, but I think Corey Dennis, the way it's structured at Ohio State with Ryan Day, maybe he's not the offensive coordinator, but he calls the plays, so he's got to be immersed in it. Let's put it that way.
Yep.
If in fact it turns out to be Corey Dennis, that's not a bad thing either, right?
Yeah, it will. That will turn out to be the fact when it's officially announced. Probably sometime next week, we'll see exactly how that transpires. But that's the plan in place. And I was.
Wait, let me interrupt you. I was trying to cover your butt there, but go ahead now.
I was curious when the move was becoming clear with Yurcich, what direction that Ryan Day would want to go with that. And the real issue was, did he need Corey Dennis to go somewhere else and do the full-time job somewhere, namely Colorado State, to get that experience, and then have him come back in a year or two whenever the next situation popped up? I thought there would be, a possibility that would be the way he wanted to go, just to make sure, because it's a big leap to go from senior quality control, where you're not on the road recruiting, you're not, we know that he does a lot of work with these guys with film and all that, but you're not the guy when it comes to on-field instruction, not allowed to be, according to NCAA rules and guidelines. It's not the NFL where you can just, hire as many people as you want to do as much instruction and hands-on as you want. So I thought there was a real possibility of that. But the flip side is, if Ryan Day, who worked directly with Corey Dennis a few years ago when he first arrived, he was in the room, they spent all that time together, putting together, the cut-ups, the film, the game plan, learning how Ryan Day wanted to coach quarterbacks, the best way to do it, the way that it's worked. If you've known for a while that this guy has it, and Ryan Day's been a great talent evaluator, you can't really question that part of it, then don't let him leave. Do whatever you can to keep him around. And that's why you said a year ago there was that conversation about, hey, maybe it'll just be Corey Dennis at that point. It wasn't, and it's worked out in this fashion where now Mike Yurcich is gone. You can expect Brian Hartline to get a big raise and probably that passing game coordinator title, which he's absolutely earned. I get this question too. You're not going to take the wide receivers away from him either. Maybe this is another guy. This is really inside baseball. Keaton Bailey, who's been Brian Hartline's right-hand man.
Yeah.
Maybe he gets a little bit of a bump, so that's another guy that they don't want to leave. Maybe he takes Corey Dennis's senior quality control role. But really, what's important here is that Day is familiar with Dennis. They believe he's got the potential to do it. He's worked with, as you said, JT, and then back-to-back Heisman Trophy finalists, Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields, when I was in New York. Both made sure to single him out for praise, unprompted.
Yes.
Those guys know him. And then you have the rest of the continuity, because Kevin Wilson still right there. Tony Alford, Greg Studrawa, who had a massive, massive year to reclaim some of the prestige for his career after a rough 2018. You have that continuity for the offense, which is clearly important for Ohio State going into 2020. So I think it's a good move. I think people will look at it and kind of wonder, because Corey Dennis hasn't done it before, that's a big ask for your first full-time gig to be coaching quarterbacks at Ohio State. But all signs at this point suggest he can do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, Ryan Day, Lincoln Riley, Dabo Sweeney, all of these guys came up in very similar fashion. They weren't superstar players, et cetera. Well, Ryan Day was pretty good at New Hampshire. Actually, he was real good. But you know what I'm saying? They've all paid their dues on the coaching trail before they got the big break, and we all see where they've gone now,
Yeah.
Even Nick Saban for that matter. But Keenan Bailey is, like you said, there's a guy that, you've heard great things about from behind the scenes for a while now. Maybe, like you said, he'll get a little bit of a bump too. I like Keenan Bailey a lot. He's personable. A lot of these guys behind the scenes get very little, if any, credit, and they are a lot of the grease that make the wheels go around. And but the Corey Dennis thing, I think that'll end up being a home run. That's what I truly believe. And the other thing keeps him from being pilfered by by one of these coaches, who were leaving or just left. Did you
Yeah,
follow my
yeah,
drift? Because they
exactly right.
they all know of his reputation. Uh, Real quick, before we go, uh, Austin, uh, what do you think about the one and done by Jeff Hafley? Is it? We talked about it a little bit on our last show, but are you square with that? I mean, and I've had a lot of people thinking he could have stuck around and gotten a quote better job, et cetera. And I'm just going, Boston College, number one. If you look at their record book, as a former head coach used to say to me, if you want to know how good a team is and how good it can be, look at what they've done.
Yeah.
And Boston College, off and on, has been a pretty good program. It's also had its depth, its deep moments, its dark moments. But uh, what do you think about him jumping at the Boston College job instead of perhaps waiting a year and getting a better job? I mean, you're not, unless Nick Saban, retires. You know what I mean? You're not going to like jump from Ohio State to Clemson or Alabama or Texas. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Or USC from a coordinator position to a head coaching position. Probably that's not going to happen. So when people say that, I just listen to them, but I kind of go, yeah, I don't think you understand really truly how it works. I think his move to Boston College is a good move because that based on the talent on hand, they've got some pretty good talent coming back. They're kind of going to have a hole here with this recruiting class unless he can work some miracles
yeah.
in the next month. But like you and I talked about in the ACC now, man, a little bit of coaching could go a long way, and you can elevate a team in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I think I've initially when the move happened, and I said this to you, and I said this to others, that same line. Surely there would have been a better opportunity if he stayed than Boston College, but there's also this element where there are only, what, 50, 60 jobs that anyone would actually want that are in the Power Five, and they're hard to get because
Right.
there are lots of other good coordinators out there waiting to take the next step. There's also, I mean, as you saw just with Steve Adazio, he was picked up by Colorado State less than a week before he was fired. After he was fired by Boston College, so
Right.
there's former head coaches, there's coordinators, there's current head coaches at other levels. Like it's hard to get those jobs. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, I thought that Jeff Hafley had a higher ceiling than Boston College. Maybe if he'd spent 2 years at Ohio State, he could have been catapulted to another. Well, we don't know what jobs are going to be open next year. It's hard to speculate and project those out. And well, he was just. I mean, he's going to get 15, $20 million guaranteed. Tell me.
Well, no, that. But if you look around the country, you're almost better off jumping to the next five. Jumping to an AAC
Yeah.
job or something like that. And if you look at the guys who were named head coaches around the country, some of the more what you would think would be more prestigious jobs, that's looks like more of a trampoline than maybe getting a lower level Power Five job. If you focus, a lot of times you get that lower level Power Five job, they're there. It's tough to in the Big Ten East. Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
Where are you going?
Yeah.
I mean, Greg Schiano, more power to him, but where's he going? I mean,
Nowhere.
that's a tough road, baby. Even in the Big Ten West, I mean, you look at Scott Frost right now. There's some, they're sticking by their man out there. That's a tough road out there. I mean, PJ Fleck, what he's done at Minnesota is crazy. I mean, and I mean, some guys. That's why I was telling people about PJ Fleck. Everybody was like knocking him because of his rah rah, sis boom bob, row the boat kind of approach. But in Western Michigan and now Minnesota, it has worked. I mean, and they're trying to tie him. I guess they did tie him up. You know how contracts are.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is, it's make the most of the opportunity you get is more the motto, right? And I think in Boston, I think in the ACC, you could be upwardly mobile pretty quick if you get a couple of players or two.
Yeah, and I think it's not fair. I don't think that Boston College is a great job. What you say is also correct, that they've had seasons where they've been really good and they've been in the mix for conference championships and all that. They're not Rutgers. I think that's important, and to specify, to backs up your point that they wouldn't be that far away if they get the right quarterback in there. Maybe they can combine that with Jeff Hafley's defense and make a lot of noise, win 8-9 games, and then suddenly Jeff Hafley becomes even more sought after because I don't think he's going to finish his career at Boston College by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, he better hope not. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's the other part too, where I sit back and look at it. Should Chris Ash have known better than to take the Rutgers job? Maybe, but he also has life-changing money for the rest of his life.
Right.
He got 5 years, whatever he got, 15 million that he put in the bank. Uh, that changes your entire life. And guess what? When that didn't
Right.
pan out the way we all knew that it wouldn't, he's right back out there, and Texas scoops him up, and he starts the process over again as one of the best defensive coordinators in the country. And then down the road, maybe somewhere else, like Charlie Strong had all these other opportunities. Maybe that'll happen for Ash as well. I think, definitely Hafley is going to be employed for a very long time as a defensive coach if Boston College doesn't work out. But what if it does? He bet on himself the same way that PJ Fleck did at Minnesota, with a job that's not that easy but has the potential to be good as long as you put in the work and know what you're doing. We'll see how that plays out for Jeff Hafley moving forward here, but this mythical 2-year commitment I just don't think is realistic in college football anymore. And also, you don't want it. If you have a situation like Mike Yurcich where it clearly was going to be in the best interest for both sides to part ways, I think Mike Yurcich is a very good offensive coach. I'm not at no point you will never have seen me say that they parted ways because Mike Yurcich couldn't be a good coach. He is he's a bright guy, and he was integral with Justin Fields this year. But he wasn't the culture fit, and he wanted an opportunity to call plays. So why would they have just gone through another year because they said it's a 2-year commitment? Sometimes you don't want it. Sometimes you don't want it, and you got to do what's best for your staff every single year. And if you're not willing to make hires and have staff of people at this level, if you're Ohio State, then you're not going to reach your true potential.
True. Hey, real quick before we go, as these guys matriculate to the NFL, I know you and Glue Man Spencer Holbrook are headed to cover the Sean Wade situation.
Yep.
J.K. Dobbins has already made his announcement. Jeffrey Okuda, in a stirring way, made his announcement. And running down the road, who is Ohio State going to miss, from your opinion? Who are they going to miss most from this group and of guys who are going to be leaving early? That's probably an obvious answer, but I'll give me a short answer, and then I'll give you my answer, and then we'll move on. Go ahead.
Short by my standards, okay. If Sean Wade decides to go, and I've been getting this question since we made the announcement that we'd be covering it. Do we know? We don't know 100% what's going to happen, and I don't know that Sean Wade is 100%, even as we sit here right now on Thursday. If Sean Wade goes and they lose both Okuda, Wade, Fuller, and Arnett, that's a huge deal. You're replacing the entire secondary. I think that there is a chance that Sean Wade comes back. So from there, I will shift my answer to.
Let me interrupt you.
Go ahead.
Where is he making his announcement?
We're going to be meeting him at his family home in Jacksonville.
Yeah, and he's going to go all the way to his family home, and y'all are going to go all the way to his family home, and he's going to announce he's coming back to Ohio State. You think that's really going to happen?
Maybe I'm too optimistic on it, but with Wade's decision, I'm curious about what the draft advisory board told him, because I think there's a difference between what the mock drafts are saying, which is all these people that are enamored by his versatility and assume that he can make the leap to being a full-time shutdown corner on the outside, and what the scouts and general managers might actually be seeing, which is having some uncertainty because he hasn't had to do it. He hasn't had to play against top receivers like Jeff Okuda, or even the secondary guys a lot of times when Damon Arnett was doing that. I think that the feedback he might have got is not going to be the same with some of the other high-end projections that people have written about with him. I don't know that for a fact. It does, he could easily have popped into Lettermen Row studios on Sunday with classes resume and workouts resuming for Ohio State on Monday. So maybe the spot matters. Maybe he just wants to be with his family. I don't know. I just know that they asked about doing having an announcement and getting coverage. And our whole thing is to be accessible to current and former players, so we're gonna do it. Uh,
Yeah. Oh,
but
yeah. I mean, I'm not. No. I mean, I think it's important to be there no matter what he says.
right, yeah,
And you know, if he says Kerry Combs or bust, then there you go. You got all kinds of scoops.
yeah,
But but the bottom line is, I mean, and like you and I talked about it. And I talk about football a lot. I mean, as much as I like Sean Wade being that slot guy, being that slot cover guy, as opposed to being the guy on the edge, are two different things, two different dynamics, two different disciplines, especially from college to the NFL. Because Bradley Roby's one of the better corners I've covered at Ohio State, and he ended up being the slot guy
yeah,
in the NFL, and for the most part, and I think Sean Wade is damn good. But like you said, where does he realistically sit in the NFL evaluation situation? When you consider he doesn't have much, if any, video of him covering guys on the edge. But we all know. I mean, who knows where he's going to end up? He could end up playing safety in the NFL. I mean, this guy, I think, definitely the sky's the limit for this guy. J.K. Dobbins, wow, good for him is the way I look at it. The young man from LaGrange, Texas, and I'm down in Texas right now. And I remember, I told you my brother has a weekend ranch in LaGrange, right outside LaGrange, and what a cool story all the way around, where he's come from, the challenges he's faced, the way he was bound and determined. I mean, leaving the field last year at the Rose Bowl, Dave Holmes from Channel 10 and I are talking to him as he leaves the field, and he said the goal for this past season was to win the national championship. I mean, he left no doubt about what his motivation was.
right.
And then, of course, after the game the other night, when that didn't happen, yeah, they were robbed. They also could have taken care of business themselves, including a couple of situations there with J.K. Dobbins on pass plays near the goal line. One that was a diving attempt that the replay official ruled that he did not get control of. It could have been a touchdown, and then that screen pass that he just flat dropped. Yeah, he could have maybe handled things himself even better. Bottom line is he left his heart on the field, and to see where he's come from and where he's headed now, I'm interested to see what the NFL thinks of him from a draft standpoint. But I think he's got a lot to offer from in a lot of ways. And it's funny, I thought, going into that game, I think one of his major selling points is the fact he can catch the ball in the backfield. I will stand on that.
Yeah.
Sometimes things happen. And, as you and I were sitting there doing that post game on the field with Bermanology, I was looking back in the same direction JK would have been looking to catch that little lob pass, the screen pass, and you're looking right into the lights there, the way they've got the lights arrayed, on the sides up in the upper reaches of that dome stadium. So a lot of things can happen, but the bottom line is good for him. Chase Young, what do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna say if I had to pick one of those guys, it would be J.K. And this one will be quick because that's the most productive season in Ohio State history, and what happened with Master Teague down the stretch. He made a big leap from freshman to sophomore year, but the 4 games that mattered, the last 4 in a row, 21
Right.
carries for 45 yards.
Right.
That's not good enough. And
Right.
I really like Marcus Crowley. I think he's got a big upside. I'm not sure still the severity of the knee, if he's going to be ready for spring practice or any of that. I saw him when we went out to the Princess to see Jack Miller, whatever that was, last Thursday. He jumped over this velvet rope in the hallway, and I'm like, oh well, he looks okay right now. So I don't know what that means, but he had just finished. He had 82 yards, excuse me, against Maryland before that injury, and he looked really impressive. He's got a little more of that J.K. sort of style to him, where, gosh, he could have even helped on Saturday night in the Fiesta Bowl. So that's going to be a huge spring thing to watch. And Chase Young, I mean, he's going to leave. We know that. That's been the plan for 18 months. But I think that the Rushmen, those defensive ends, they're good to go. You have Jonathan Cooper back now, chance to get healthy, fifth-year senior. Hasn't really got a chance to reach that 5-star potential yet, but can. Then Tyreek Smith, another guy who's been beset by injuries, but let him get healthy. Zach Harrison, my goodness, so much better than I thought he could be as a true freshman.
Let me interrupt you right now.
Yeah.
Watch the Trevor Lawrence touchdown run,
Yeah.
and in the end, the guy who's chasing him came from along is Zach, and stride for stride with him is Zach Harrison, defensive end.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have helped if they had tackled him at the line of scrimmage, but wow, I mean, the upside for Zach Harrison is crazy. Now go ahead.
No, I think, and I'm trying to remember. I think he got the start in the Fiesta Bowl. He was out there for the first play of the game, which is just I never ever would have envisioned that from him in year one. And then
Right.
Tyler Friday made a sack on Saturday night too. So you've got those four ends. Now, you're talking about some guys that you're really going to miss. Someone we've talked about a ton this year, Devon Hamilton, BB Landers. We'll see if that next wave of defensive tackles can get rolling. If Teron Vincent can finally get healthy and play for the first time in his career. But
Yeah.
I don't think it sounds crazy to say this because Chase Young is the best defensive end I think I've ever covered, and I am more productive than the Bosas, and that's an argument for a completely another show. But the way Ohio State is recruited, the way Larry Johnson develops, I don't think that they're going to miss a beat with the pass rush, even without a Heisman Trophy finalist at defensive end. That sounds
Yeah.
insane, but I think
Yeah.
they're going to be okay.
The special player, I mean, I think Chase Young is ridiculous also. Jeff Okuda, you knew this day was coming for Jeff Okuda.
Yeah.
But man, just when it's just these corners, just when they really get it, you get that like 1 year out of them and then they're gone.
Right.
And that's, back in my day when I was growing up, and that's probably not fair. It wasn't fair for the players, but when you're a fan of watching college football, you just hate to see them leave so early, just because you want to see them have that year where they just flat dominate, for want of another term. And, it paid off for Joey Galloway when he returned. I mean, he dominated. And I'm talking about as a wide receiver and things, but man, it's so rare anymore that you get to see these guys all the way through. And you just think about the great teams you could have seen if it wasn't for the leaving early aspect of college football anymore. But, that's the way it is, man. And that's kind of the way I wanted to wrap this up, Boston, was every season, enjoy that season because the next year is going to be different. I mean, and I know, Tim, that's pretty profound. But, I mean, just in college football, the teams turn over so rapidly now. It's almost all the great teams are almost kind of like middle of the road or lower rung NFL teams. They've got brand new personnel, it seems like, from 1 year to the next.
Yeah.
And, one, because the team's not good enough, and then in the college sense, because the teams are so damn good. And so I hope, this was a special season, I think, in the country, quarterback-wise. I mean, Tagovailoa before he got hurt, but Trevor Lawrence showing why he was the Heisman Trophy favorite going into the year along with Tagovailoa and playing great. I mean, he was, for everything we talked about that Clemson game the other night, Trevor Lawrence put Clemson on his back in the second quarter and said, not on my watch,
Right. Yep.
And it was a phenomenal performance by that guy. Yes, Justin Fields threw for more yards, et cetera, but Trevor Lawrence was not going to be denied. And, in Clemson history, Clemson lore, that 4-play drive to take the lead in the fourth quarter will go down as one of the great moments in that program's history.
Yep.
It's funny when you're covering something, instead of just enjoying it from afar, you get wrapped up into what the team you're covering, its pluses or minuses, and you don't really necessarily enjoy sort of the masterpiece or that was more of a Pollock a wild modern art piece we watched the other night, a lot of slashes and stuff. But the bottom line is you don't really enjoy what you just watched, both from the good and the bad. And it's more of the despair that Ohio State fans and players and coaches were feeling after that game instead of the holy smokes, what if Justin Fields, what if Olave hadn't fallen down and just run that route? What would we have seen?
Yeah.
We look at it from more of that angle. And in fact, that was a hell of a college football game. And that's why I'm blessed to be a sports writer all my life, man. I've been able to enjoy great moments. There are a million of them, going back to like even that 96 season, the Rose Bowl, when Joe Germain, and with the help of some pass interference calls, took Ohio State down the field and won that game, et cetera. There have been a million of them.
Yeah. It's, as you said, we are lucky to do what we get to do. And I was just kind of thinking about that because I went down to the field and I was kind of, the last 4 minutes, I was trying to get snap judgments and the instant game story ready, and it was a stressful situation because it could have gone either way, obviously. Yeah. And I'm like, that's high stress. That's high wire, and you're not really enjoying what happened there. And I got down there, and this was the first like really big game that Spencer got to cover, and it's one of the best ones that you're ever going to see. And he's like, man, that was an incredible game. And I was like,
yes,
yeah, I guess it was. But I all I was thinking about was the fumble, and did I get the score right in that instant game story and the snap judgments, and I hope I got everything correct because I had a win story and a loss story. And I'm like,
yes,
it's you even asked me like how it recovered. Like it's 5 days later, and I'm like, I guess that was a truly, like, Clemson came back from 16 down. You had these unforgettable plays for Ohio State and the officials, and they had to answer the bell with a go-ahead drive, and fourth and one, Ryan Day goes for it and touchdown to Olave. And it's like that was a hell of a game, and it's like I don't think I've even really got a chance to recognize that what we saw was something that people will talk about forever, and we were there.
Dude, that's what we talked about going into that game. Big games like that where the teams are even, it comes down to the big plays, and Trevor Lawrence delivered that big, long touchdown run, which, oh, my goodness, who saw that coming? Mm-hmm. But then 4th and 2, and Ryan Day opts to go for it. Not just go for it. He opted to go for the touchdown because they got the coverage they wanted, and they hook up, and boom, Ohio State has the lead again. And then they force a punt, and then Clemson gets the ball back one more time, and Ohio State, man, 2 more first downs maybe on that one drive, and the game's over. It's like that previous drive, and then you say, you're right. Just right on down the line, there were just great moments to just enjoy football. If in fact those are the kind of things you enjoy, cliffhanger football, and it was all right there in front of you. And I hope people do take at least a moment or two to understand how these guys were just going tooth and nail at each other, man. Heavyweight fight without a doubt, and you had the privilege of watching it.
Yep. Now I'm just sitting here. I'm like, that Garrett Wilson catch feels like it was 1,000 years ago.
Yeah,
I don't even think about it, and that's like, you'd wait decades to see a catch like that, and it's like that was just one of 50 in that game.
Yeah, he only got 18 feet off the floor, Well, hey, you know what? We're going to wrap it up because we're going to get together next week and do a little bit of a preview of the national championship game. And I like previewing games like this because and it still has a little bit of an Ohio State touch when you consider Clemson wouldn't be there probably. Without that botched call against Ohio State, but Clemson did earn its way in a lot of respects. But then the Joe Burrow story, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. Don't try to write in a script for it because Hollywood will reject it on first run. But they'll want to inject their own fiction into it. But I digress. Yeah. But the bottom line is, you and I can talk about that pending game too. And I hope you and Spencer have a good time in Jacksonville. There's some good places to eat down there, as you well know. But you know what, Boston, thanks for joining me again on the Tim May podcast, and thanks for you and Glue Man making this hookup possible while I deal with a situation down here concerning my mom and my family. But you know what, until next week, this is Tim May with the Tim May podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe below to get the latest videos from Lettermen Row.
We got Letterman Live, we've got the practice report, we got rapid reaction. Hey, and we got Buckeye IQ with Zach Bourne.
For sure. We got recruiting breakdowns with Berm. We got whatever you need. Ohio State football and Ohio State athletics, we've got you covered here at Lettermen Row.